Today we're going to do something a little dangerous. We're going to run 7 perfectly good brains through a series of stress tests until they break your brain, and why that's actually a good thing. Starting from the first one, we have Mary's room. The simple setup is this. Imagine a scientist named Mary, and she spent her entire life in a black and white room studying everything there is to know about color. She knows the exact wavelength of red light, how photons hit your retina, how your brain cells fire when you see a crimson apple. She knows every single physical fact about color that science can possibly teach. But here's the thing, she's only ever seen black, white, and shades of gray. She's never actually experienced color herself. Then one day, someone hands her a red apple, and she sees red for the very first time. Here's the logical trap. Does Mary learn something new in that moment? Not a new fact, she already knew all the facts, but a new experience of what red actually feels like, this subjective quality that can't be captured in equations. If you say yes, then you're saying there are truths about the world that science, with all its physical measurements and equations, can never capture, which means our physical picture of reality is incomplete. But if you say no, you're saying that experiencing red is exactly the same as reading about wavelengths, which means consciousness itself is just data, and that feels completely wrong to anyone who's ever actually seen a sunset. The trap is that both answers break something fundamental about how we think about knowledge. If that messed with your sense of what science can know, let me introduce you to number 2, the Sorites Paradox, also known as the heap problem. The simple setup is this. Imagine you have a massive heap of sand on a table, let's say 1,000 grains, and everyone agrees it's definitely, unquestionably, a heap. Now you remove one single grain, just one tiny grain, and you ask, is it still a heap? Of course it is, you say, because one microscopic grain couldn't possibly change the fundamental nature of the thing. So you remove another grain, and then another, and then another, and ask the same question each time. And every time your brain says, yup, still a heap, because the change is too small to notice. But here's the logical trap. If you keep removing grains one by one, at what exact number does it stop being a heap? Is it at 500 grains? Is it at 300? Is it at 50? Is it at 3? The problem is that our brains are absolutely certain that heap is a real, meaningful category, but logic demands a clear, sharp line, and there simply isn't one. The trap is that either you admit our language is hopelessly vague and fuzzy, or you have to pick an arbitrary number and defend why that number is special, which feels ridiculous. Again, this is not about the sand. It's about how our words are messier than our logic, and trying to make them precise can actually make them useless. It shows that much of our everyday language works because it's vague, but our brains are wired to think in straight, binary categories. Something is either a heap or it's not, and those two systems don't play well together. Now, if that messed with your sense of how we categorize the world, wait until we question whether a system that follows rules can ever truly understand anything at all. At number 3, we have the Chinese room. This one is very relevant in today's world because it questions whether any system that follows rules like an AI or even your own brain can ever truly understand anything at all. The simple setup for the Chinese room is this. Imagine you're locked in a giant room with a massive instruction manual written in English. Through a slot in the wall, people pass you cards with questions written in Chinese characters. You don't understand a single word of Chinese, but your manual tells you exactly which Chinese symbols to pass back out through the slot based purely on the shape and order of the symbols that came in. It's just a giant lookup table. To the people outside, it looks like you understand Chinese perfectly, you're giving correct, coherent answers to their questions, and passing the Turing test with very acceptable grades. But here's the logical trap. Does the room or the system of you plus the manual actually understand Chinese? If you say yes, then you're saying that following syntax rules, that manipulating symbols based on shape and order, is the same as having semantics, which would mean that every computer program that processes language truly understands it, which is crazy. But if you say no, then you're saying that no system that just manipulates symbols according to rules can ever have genuine understanding. which would mean AI can never be conscious, and, more disturbingly, that your own brain, which also processes signals according to biochemical rules, might not truly understand anything either. The trap forces you to either admit that consciousness is just fancy symbol manipulation, or that there's something mysterious about understanding that we can't replicate with algorithms, which has huge implications for AI, for philosophy of mind, and for what makes humans special. Now, you may be thinking that sounds dumb, and you're right. I brought it up because it's a popular thought experiment, but when you think about it, there's a fundamental difference between my glorious panda brain and an AI. Our brains are dynamic, self organizing systems that create meaning from experience, to feel things, to have intentions and goals that arise from within. An AI is just manipulating symbols it was programmed to manipulate, but a panda brain is generating meaning through living, through interacting with the world, through having a body that feels hunger and warmth and curiosity. The Chinese room assumes that understanding is just symbol manipulation, but that's missing the point entirely. So while the thought experiment is clever, it kind of misses that real understanding might require exactly what biological brains have and silicon chips don't: embodied experience, genuine motivation, and the capacity to care about what the symbols mean. Next, how about we question what you even means, especially if you could be copied, destroyed, and rebuilt across the universe? That brings us to number 4, the teletransportation paradox. The simple setup for the teletransportation paradox is this: you're standing in a teleportation booth on Earth, and you press a button that scans every single atom in your body, records the exact position and state of every particle, then beams that information to Mars at the speed of light, where a second booth uses that blueprint to perfectly reconstruct you every memory, every physical aspect of your being, from local atoms. The person who steps out on Mars remembers being you, feels like you, believes they are you, and is atom for atom identical to the you that stepped into the booth. But here's the logical trap: is that person actually you, or just a perfect copy that thinks it's you, while the original you was destroyed? Yes, what if, to make it more efficient, the Earth booth also destroys your original body during the scan, so you're not duplicated? Does that make the Mars copy more you? But what if the machine malfunctions and doesn't destroy the original? Now there are two of you, one on Earth, one on Mars, both with identical memories up to the moment of scanning. Which one is the real you? The trap is that if identity is about physical continuity, the same atoms traveling through space in an unbroken line, then teleportation kills you and makes a clone on Mars, and you've committed die without realizing it. But if identity is about information and pattern, the blueprint of your memories and personality, then you survive just fine, which means you could be copied infinitely and each copy would be equally you. Both answers kind of make sense, but I don't want you guys to overthink this thought experiment. After all, souls are not atoms that can be recreated. Alright, next is number 5, the utility monster. The simple setup for the utility monster is this: imagine a creature called the utility monster that experiences happiness at a level that's completely off the charts. Every single resource you give it, every dollar, every piece of food, every minute of your attention brings it an absolutely massive, almost infinite amount of joy. Meanwhile, when you or I eat a candy bar or watch a good movie, we get a little bit of pleasure, but it's basically nothing compared to what the utility monster feels. But here's the logical trap. If you believe in utilitarianism, the moral philosophy that says morality is about creating the greatest happiness for the greatest number of people, then you are morally obligated to give the utility monster literally everything. Every resource, every scrap of food, every possession that makes you even slightly happy should go to the monster, because it can convert that into vastly more happiness than you or a billion other people ever could combined. The contradiction is that this perfectly logical application of a very common moral framework leads to an absurd, horrifying conclusion. You should sacrifice yourself completely, let yourself be miserable, and give everything to this one monster's pleasure. Most people would immediately realize how impractical utilitarianism is. You can't have both utilitarianism and fairness. And the trap is that the monster reveals this tension in a way that's impossible to ignore. Exactly. Happiness alone can't be the only thing that matters, and that distribution and fairness have value even if they're harder to quantify. Now, if that felt like a trap where both choices are bad, what about a trap where two completely logical choices both seem right, but you can only pick one and there's no consensus about which is correct? That brings us to number 6, Newcomb's Paradox. The simple setup for Newcomb's Paradox is this. A super intelligent alien, let's call it the predictor, has been watching you for your whole life and knows you so well that it can predict your choices with perfect accuracy. The predictor presents you with two boxes. Box A is clear, and you can see it has $1,000 in it. But box B is not as clear, and you can't see inside it. The predictor has already chosen whether to put $1 million in box B or leave it empty, and it made this choice based on its perfect prediction of what you will decide to do. Here's the thing. If the predictor predicted you would take both boxes, it left box B empty. If it predicted you would take only box B, it put the million inside. Now, about that logical trap, there are two arguments, and both make sense. The first argument says, take both boxes. Why? Because the predictor has already made its choice and left the room. Right now, as you're standing there, the money is either in box B or it's not. Nothing you do can change what's already been decided. So you might as well take both boxes and get the extra $1,000 from box A no matter what. If box B is empty, you get $1,000. If box B happens to have the million, you get $1,001,000. Either way, you're better off by $1,000 than if you'd only taken box B. But the second argument says, take only box B. Why? Because it is revealed that every single time this game has been played in the past, the predictor has been perfect. Everyone who took both boxes was predicted to be a two-boxer. So box B was empty, and they walked away with just the $1,000 from box A. Everyone who took only box B was predicted to be a one-boxer. So box B had the million, and they walked away rich. The pattern is overwhelming. Two boxers get $1,000. One boxers get $1 million. So the trap is this. If you trust the evidence of past patterns, you should take only box B. But if you trust pure logic about the current situation, you should take both boxes. Both arguments make sense, but they lead to opposite choices, and you can't do both. The paradox is that your choice seems to causally affect a decision that was made in the past, and there's no way to reconcile the two arguments without rejecting some deeply held principle about causality or evidence. Finally, what if we push the concept of infinity itself until it breaks our most basic intuitions about numbers and quantity? That brings us to number 7, the infinite hotel, also known as Hilbert's hotel. The simple setup for the infinite hotel is this. Imagine a hotel with an infinite number of rooms, all numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on forever, and they stretch out into mathematical infinity. Every single room is occupied. We're talking infinitely many guests, infinitely many rooms. The hotel is completely full. A new guest walks in and asks for a room, and you, as the manager, need to tell them you're fully booked. But here's the logical trap. You can absolutely give them a room, and it's simple. How? Just ask every current guest to move to the room number that's one higher than their current room. Guest in room 1 moves to room 2, room 2 moves to room 3, room 3 moves to room 4, and so on infinitely. Since there are infinite rooms, there's no last guest who can't move, and now room 1 is free. But it gets worse. What if an infinite tour bus shows up with infinitely many new guests? You can still fit them in by asking every current guest to move to double their room number 12, 24, 36, 48, 24, which magically frees up all the infinite odd-numbered rooms for your infinite new guests. The contradiction is that infinity doesn't behave like normal numbers at all. You can add to infinity without making it bigger. You can subtract from infinity, and it's still infinity. Infinity plus infinity is just infinity. You can fill a hotel completely, then fill it again with more guests, and somehow it's not more full than it was before. This is mathematical proof that infinity is so fundamentally alien to how our brains evolved to think about quantities that trying to apply normal logic to it is mute. No wonder Sukuna needed some BS plot convenience to somehow bypass Gojo's infinity and kill him. And with that said, these were the 7 thought experiments that break your brain and why. Which one broke your brain the most? Was it Mary finally seeing red? Or the heap of sand? The room that speaks Chinese without understanding? Or the teleportation that might kill you? The monster that deserves everything? Or the boxes that make two perfect arguments fight each other? Or the infinite hotel that somehow fits more guests when it's already full? Let me know in the comments below, and make sure to look forward to my next video because it's going to be bigger and better than this one, and there'll be much more interesting thought experiments. So stay curious, stay skeptical, and I'll see you in the next video.